This is a video about science and diplomacy and the need to bridge the gap between mindsets by developing a global curriculum to tackle future challenges together.
Most of the challenges we are facing today, they share three characteristics. We need science to understand them or technology to address them. They all cross national borders and no country or sector can tackle them alone.
It's important that we bring the two worlds together so that those who give advice on science policy development understand how science might shape the future.
We need to train people who speak both languages, if I may say, speak both the natural science language, or at least understand it, and speak or understand the social science language.
The COVID-19 pandemic, the climate, food and energy crisis all highlight the increasingly important role of science on the international stage.
It symbolizes so well the spirit of collaboration for progress, a spirit that we've never been so much in need of championing, reaffirming and fighting for.
Building bridges between the scientific and diplomatic worlds has never been more urgent, but these communities remain educationally and professionally siloed.
What for us a few months ago was a dream has rapidly become reality.
It's about using science to achieve diplomatic goals.
Future leaders will need innovative educational frameworks, training approaches, and exchange platforms to better understand each other and work together. The GESDA Science Breakthrough Radar, launched in 2021, anticipates the scientific breakthroughs that will emerge over the next 25 years in fields such as artificial intelligence, neurotechnologies, or decarbonization.
Making the GESDA Science Breakthrough Radar available to the international community as a training tool, and by training the future ambassadors of science diplomacy.
A coalition of Geneva, Swiss and global institutions brought together and facilitated by GESDA is prototyping and validating this global curriculum to create a shared foundation to advance science diplomacy for the benefit of all. Each May, the Science Diplomacy Week convenes leaders from around the world for an immersive learning and networking experience into the ecosystem of academic and diplomatic institutions of international Geneva.
We are so excited to bring all of the coalition members that have been working very hard to bring us the content and the discussions that we're going to have this week.
The future global curriculum will be contextualized for different regions and career levels. For example, youth.
It's important to bring young people in these conversations because it's only them that will be able to ensure that future generations across the world fully enjoy the benefits of science and technology and leave no one behind.
Through a youth and anticipation initiative, the University of Cape Town and GESDA engage African youth with the topics of the Breakthrough Radar to bridge the understanding of how science may shape our future.
And then use these predicted futures to shape the present while ensuring that decisions and discussions include voices of African youth.
Science can also bring new insight into how we use diplomacy and how we understand multilateralism.
The SID Lab, Laboratory for Science and Diplomacy, is to capture and curate the data of multilateral interactions.
Through a solid base of expert partners in the field, the curriculum will aggregate, enhance, promote, and scale existing educational offers through global coordinated outreach, identify gaps, and develop new offers to address them. Together, we can use the future to build the present.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to address you during this second Geneva Science and Diplomacy Anticipation Summit and to present the work we have been engaged in to advance capacity building in science and diplomacy globally. I wish I were here in Geneva with you today, but I address you from Kigali, Rwanda during the 145th Assembly of the Interparliamentary Union. The solution idea we are presenting is an initiative to develop a global curriculum on science and diplomacy 18 months ago, at GESDA's invitation, I had the honor to become the diplomacy co-chair of this solution alongside my academic co-chair, Dr. Marga Gual-Soler, in Geneva with you today. Our first exchanges highlighted the gap of understanding between scientific, policy-making, and diplomatic communities in addressing technology emergence and how to best embrace it. How can we collectively build our future if we do not understand what will be shaping it? How can we make science relevant for multilateralism if we cannot speak to each other? We aim to bridge the gap between scientific and diplomatic communities and foster a common language and space for mutual understanding and collaboration. This solution will serve all of GESDA's work and help us in our nations as well. Today, we face a paradox. Many global challenges have scientific and technological dimensions, transcend national boundaries, and require all sectors working together. But scientists and diplomats lack a shared language, common mindset, and place to exchange. The curriculum wants to bridge this gap. To establish an anticipatory science and diplomacy mindset, we must begin by how we train current and future leaders in all sectors, in STEM, national governments, multilateral organizations, or the private sector, empowering the current and next generation with a multilingual mindset in science and diplomacy, fostering boundary-spanning professionals and institutions. To achieve this, we set out to coalesce leading Geneva, Swiss, and international institutions specialized in scientific research and education, diplomatic training, and capacity building at the science diplomacy interface. This was how the Geneva Coalition on Anticipatory Science Diplomacy was born. With 14 initial members from both academic and diplomatic worlds, we successfully delivered a first joint pilot program, the Science Diplomacy Week, an immersion program, an open forum in international Geneva for current and future science and diplomacy leaders. Science can do a great deal in terms of tensions as an area of political neutrality, providing solutions by turning elements of conflict into reasons for coexistence, as we have seen in the IPU Science for Peace initiative in collaboration with CERN. Diplomacy must also support scientific progress for humanity's greater good. Education and training of all actors in this mindset at all levels is the basis to accomplish our ambition. The Interparliamentary Union, as the global organization of national parliaments, has a unique vantage point in science diplomacy. We're here to ensure parliamentarians are fully integrated as one of science diplomacy's key stakeholders, because multilateral agreements are implemented at the national level through parliaments. Parliamentarians, as representatives of the people, scrutinize and adopt legislation, vote budgets, and exercise oversight to guide the way in which science and technology are developed, regulated, and used. In fact, the IPU Working Group on Science and Technology is drafting an international charter on the ethics of science and technology. I wish you a productive session, and I leave you now with my academic co-chair, Dr. Marga Gual-Soler, and our task force colleagues to tell you more about the curriculum. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is a great pleasure to unveil today this solution idea that GESDA is putting forward, as you know, as one of the two most advanced solutions that we want to put forward to the world to get your feedback and include you in the work that we are doing. So my name is Marga Gual Soler. I am the co-chair of the solution, together with my co-chair Martin Chungong, who you just heard. And I think enough introduction and setting the scene was provided by the solution video and by my co-chair, so I will not go into it. I just want to thank, really take a moment to thank all of the members of the task force, which we call coalition in this solution, that have been part of this for the last 18 months. And these institutions are Geneva, Swiss, and international institutions, and they are the Geneva Science Policy Interface, UNITAR, the International Science Council, the International Network for Government Science Advice, the SDG Lab, the Interparliamentary Union, the University of Zurich, CERN, Diplo Foundation, the SEED Lab that includes University of Geneva and ETH Zurich, the Geneva Center for Science for Security Policy, the Graduate Institute, and of course GESDA. So I won't tell you more about the solution because we have here the members of the coalition that have shaped the solution with us. We have some alumni that came to this first pilot, the Geneva Science Diplomacy Week, that are going to share with us about the experience, and we're going to hear from all of them the plans for the future of this global curriculum on science diplomacy. So with that, I will leave you with our excellent moderator, Dr. Achim Venman, who's the Director of Strategic Partnerships of the Graduate Institute, that will lead us to this session. So the floor is yours, Achim. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Yes, Marga, your applause. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. As this is an afternoon session just after lunch, I will make you work first. And I'd like to ask you if you think you are ready, with terms of your skill set, what you know right now, to do science diplomacy tomorrow. So if you are ready, raise your hand. So that's okay, that's a good 10%. If you don't know, raise your hand. That's about 30%. If you know that you're not ready, raise your hand. Okay, that's another 30%. Thank you very much. Good. Now we're gonna use this now that we know that there is a kind of a need out there between those who know that they don't know and between those who don't know what they don't know. We want to bring the panelists on the first round of the panelists on stage to hear from those who are really very closely associated to some of the breakthrough radar topics, in order to see how they see the needs for training and education and different needs. So if I can invite my first round of panelists up, and we just distribute along these great chairs here. The microphone is right here for you. And now I'm very, very glad to welcome on stage, to my right, Tamara Gomez-Marin, who's from the Foreign Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Costa Rica, currently based in Rome. Welcome. We have to my right also Francesca Bosco, who is the Chief Strategy, who is responsible for strategy at the Cyber Peace Institute. Welcome. And also Alison Mutori from the University of California, San Diego. You are the furthest away. You are just from across the street, and you are coming from Rome. So, and now, staying close, Francesca, can we start with you? And can you walk us through some of your views on the education and capacity building needs you see, particular with respect to things that you're working on cybersecurity, cyber warfare, all these things that are currently in the media right now?
Kind of, yes. Yeah, so thank you so much for the question, and thanks for the opportunity. Actually, I mean, maybe a couple of words about the Cyber Peace Institute. Cyber Peace Institute, as you very well said, is, let's say, close by. We are a civil society organization. We are an NGO based here in Geneva, and when the institute was created 3 years ago, the idea was really like to fill a gap. So it's very good that we are here to talk about it, to fill a gap because there was this sort of like sense that cybersecurity and I would say also new and emerging technologies were kind of like discussed either in sort of like close communities, so usual suspect communities, or for example, in terms of like on the media when something bad is happening, or at the government level. There was not really like an integration, and especially a sort of like neutral and independent entity that would work specifically with the lens of thinking, okay, but what if cyber attacks, and what if the threats posed by new technologies are impacting people at the end of the day? What if they're impacting vulnerable communities? And so that's why the Institute came across. And it's interesting that you ask about, I mean, which skills we need, because this is a question that we also asked ourselves when we were building the Institute. And okay, you need the technical skills. And so, for example, we have a very strong technical team that is collecting data and analyzing the data related to attacks. But then we are adding a slightly different lens. So not only thinking about which are, for example, the economic cost of cyber attacks. So you will find many reports about that out there, but mostly looking at what is really happening in terms of like impact on society and the harm that cyber attacks might cause. Practical example of what we did in terms of like building capacity for the global public was like to publish during, unfortunately, during the pandemic, a platform that is mapping cyber attacks against critical infrastructure and specifically the healthcare sector and showing the impact. So how many ambulances redirected, how many people could not get vaccines because of cyber attacks. So one point is like collecting the data, analyzing the data with the lens by which is understandable. Because one of the biggest gaps that we've seen in this field, and it was also referred to in the previous panel, was, it's the language gap at the end of the day. We're not using the same language, and there is also a sort of like uneven maturity when it comes to knowledge, right? And so we were trying to kind of like set a playing field by which there is a strong technical backbone, but also a way, a visualization and a narrative that people can understand, and even more so, that people can understand and use in two ways. One, policymakers, and that's why it's extremely relevant for today's discussion, because policymakers, to make better, let's say, laws and policies, need to understand what is happening to people. And often, I've been working in cybersecurity since 2006, and mostly from a UN and government perspective, and also working with the private sector. Clearly, these are fields that are fairly, let's say, acquainted with the topic, and indeed, there has been quite a progress, but still, there was always one part that is missing, which is what is happening to civil society, what is happening to people in real life, and therefore how we can better frame policies that are based on data, that are evidence-driven, but they will basically serve the people that are made for. So we package this for policymakers. And doing this, for example, via the submission to high-level UN processes like the open-ended working group and also different international high-level initiatives like the Paris Call. But by doing this, we also build the capacity. So it's not just, let's say, publishing a paper or blog post, but it's also calling for meetings, discussing with policymakers to understand which are the gaps, to understand which are the needs, to understand all the complexities that, new technologies might pose in terms of like risk and threats. And then there is also another very important capacity building angle. Starting from the point of like working with the most vulnerable, we also need to build capacity of the most vulnerable. So for example, the data that we are analyzing, and we did the same when it comes to attacks against the civilian infrastructure in the conflict in Ukraine, what we are doing is providing support to policymakers, but also to civil society organizations in the field that they will need to enhance their cybersecurity posture. Most of the civil society organizations out there, we tested the program in Geneva, but now the program is global, and we also have a regional approach in Africa and in LATAM. What they are doing is to provide the critical services to people, but often they are not, let's say, cyber savvy. And so what we do is also to use the same type of data-driven knowledge to package it in a way that civil society organizations can understand and use to boost their skills.
Excellent, Francesca. Look, I'm just putting a few things out there. So you talked about the need to deconstruct. to develop the data, to have the right research. Some degree of unlearning that has to be done, because, I mean, many of us who have had to have intellectual backgrounds from university 20, 30 years ago, there's a whole series of unlearning and also getting, in fact, into a space of going into elements that you could never imagine.
Right.
This is so getting to the unimaginable, and then the direct engagement.
Yeah.
In order, this is a constantly ongoing process. Plus, of course, the needs of capacity building. The only thing that I say to this, oh my God, in terms of scale and speed, only human augmentation can help us. And I think that is, Alison, that is your field of domain. And do you have the answers, or can you help us also to see where, in addition to all of the elements, unlearning and so forth, the mindset change, where do you see the needs for education and capacity building?
That's a great point, and I don't have all the answers, but I can give you like a personal experience to illustrate how much of this is important and how far we are from finding all those answers and having the right people to help the basic scientists. So my lab basically work with brain organoids. For those who don't know, these are stem cell human-made neurotissue, and the technology is not new. I mean, it exists since 2008. And was flying under the radar of everyone for a long time until 2019, when our lab showed for the first time that those tissues can now start to work or to function as the brain. They start to generate neural circuitries and neural oscillations similar to what you can record from an EEG. So that opens like the Pandora box, and we publish on that, and that was like a big media splash, calling that we made mini brains in a dish. And of course, I mean, it conveys the wrong image of exactly what we have in the technology. But it was enough for me to be exposed and started receiving questions from both the media, reporters, journalists, but also from the public about this type of technology. I mean, what we can do with that? Can we implant those neurotissues in our brains? Can we augment memory? Can we increase our memory? Can we improve cognition? Can we save lives from people with suffering with neurological conditions? So these were all questions that were out there. And now imagine that you can combine this technology with other technologies, such as genome editing. Can we CRISPR out some genes? Can we make people resistant to Alzheimer's? Can we increase the number of synapses in your brain? So this is all possible. And those questions were getting to me really fast before I had the time to process them. And I started to seek for advice at my university. I need some training here. How can I answer all these questions? And there is nobody to actually help me. And talking to my colleagues at the basic science level, this is not unusual. This happens to everyone. And there are a couple of videos from Jennifer Doudna. She is the Nobel Prize who discovered the CRISPR enzymes for genome editing. And she was caught in the same situation. She was working with CRISPR for a long time, and then suddenly there's a big splash, Nobel Prize, and she was forced to have this public image and talk about this new technology with no training whatsoever. So this was something that we scientists are missing. We're missing this kind of support to actually help us. One thing that I see, mistakes that we made in the past, for example, in my field, Dolly the clone. This was a technology that people from the stem cell field has been working for a long period of time. But it was only when someone cloned an animal that it becomes like a huge splash in the media and cause some negative reaction on people that actually slow down science. So there's a turning point where it's hard to fix the damage. So it's better to work with policymakers, with the public, establish a dialogue between how the science is advancing before this turning point. And I think that's where I find the most need for this kind of
But isn't this exactly the idea that sometimes it's good to put a break on science, particularly if not all of the ethical and all of the human implications are really understood. So that I would put out there for exactly the type of engagement issues which are necessary between the scientists and the learners and the people out there. No? And diplomats are part of that picture, and you, of course, are exactly, Tamara, you are working in diplomacy, you are working on the future of diplomacy. Now, you have been part of the GESDA group on the Science Diplomacy Week. You have already had that exchange between learning about science diplomacy and, of course, understanding the new future out there in the science labs and elsewhere. How do you go on this in terms of identifying needs and capacity building in the diplomatic sector?
Well, the panel before, there was the ambassador from Israel, and she shared some thoughts that I think are very accurate. And is that diplomats are maybe sometimes moving from crisis to crisis, or we are taking long time to discuss some subjects that started in the past or are still happening now. So we are not really taking time to think in the future, or the future is really close to our decision-making processes. And that's what I think the radar is so important. And for me, it was really a transformative experience, I have to say, because what I saw was, and I was one of the few diplomats actually participating in this discussion, I saw a really big need from the scientific part of partners, and my colleagues are here, to try to understand how diplomats take decisions. And I remember one colleague saying, sometimes you don't give like the sensation you're being honest, right? And the other way around, these subjects are so complicated and so incredible that sometimes diplomats are not taking maybe the time to really study all these subjects, because there are that many incredible studies or advancements or science breakthroughs that are very complicated to understand. But the part that I see more important for me from the radar, and that's what the main takeaway I had, was the philosophical compass at the moment, and now philosophical lenses and geopolitical lenses. Why? Because if we don't understand and we don't discuss the ethical questions and the social dilemmas that are there, we are not going to understand each other, I believe, because if I remember the neuro rights panel we had during the training, and somebody's explaining that we could erase maybe some memories that are traumatizing, but are we still going to be the same person? And for me, as a diplomat, I was like, whoa, I never had asked this question before. And if I'm not aware of where science is going through, and with the radar, we are starting to understand that, I'm not going to really pay attention or understand the magnitude of what is in place right now, what is happening right now. On the other way around, if we don't talk about social dilemmas, scientists maybe won't stop to ask some questions about where are we going with science, or to understand why diplomats or decision makers have to stop before taking some decisions. We have to defend positions, we have interests. And so I think the program and the radar help us to bring all this together and to start like a really clear dialogue, and building trust is everything also in diplomacy, but among two different worlds. And that was something that also Marga said, and it has been said here and during the program as well, how to create these hybrid thinkers or this multilingual mindset. And for me, that's the main door, with the social dilemmas, with the ethical questions, because then we all, scientists, decision makers, we come to a common ground to start to then understand better each other, and then to be, I see it like links and motors for national discussions, and to bring these discussions that are happening here in multilateral Geneva, that is making it possible. But for me, as a diplomat, the second takeaway was how I'm going to take this back home and connect with my local science community, with local civil society and local communities, to really engage in these discussions. Because how am I supposed to come to multilateral arena to defend some priorities if I still, at home, they don't connect with my national realities? So that's something that it's, for me, very, very important to try to push, not only the program, but how the program is giving us tools to go back home and to create some awareness around these subjects.
Excellent. Thank you, Tamara. Thank you, Francesca. Thank you, Alison. You represent the demand side. No? We're now going to see what the supply side has to say, what the training offerers have to say. So from this note, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us upstage here. Please take your name sign, because a new set of name signs are going to come up. Please. And not just name sign. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, you've already seen the kind of complexity which is out there, both in terms of the speed and scale of the education challenge, the complexity, but also, I would say, the notion of building up this kind of multilinguality, but also the capability of leashing those who don't want to play a game, those who just want to do science without wanting to connect to anything else, with just to only want to do diplomacy without doing anything else. So between the leashing, between the multilinguality, there is, I think, education which is a very nice way in the middle to connect, to engage constantly. And we have here 3 members of the Geneva Coalition, which are sharing with us how they are going about trying to deconstruct this type of very complex place of education and training on science and diplomacy. We have Nicolas Levrat, who is from the director of the Global Studies Institute in the middle here, Kristina Orisic from the Geneva Center for Security Policy, and Nicolas Seidler from the executive director of the Geneva Science and Policy Interface. Thank you very much for making time today. And perhaps, Nicolas Levrat, I start with you. How do you work on innovation in this field? We see this is kind of really a new type of challenge for many universities. So how do you at the Global Studies Institute go about this in responding to that very complex need which we just heard?
Yes, we heard very interesting element and naturally challenging for university people. I heard about unlearning. Oh, but we're supposed to do the teaching and they're supposed to learn. So what did we do wrong? Or what are we missing? I also heard about this language problem. And yes, this is a genuine issue. And you see, in university, we believe, at least in the type of university that we have here in Europe, that there is a close link between research and teaching. But the way our universities are organized is not producing sufficient results to meet the needs of the global challenges. So, yes, we do have a problem. Multilateral diplomacy is not working very well for the time being. Last major multilateral treaties was probably at the end of the 90s. That's a long time ago. Especially if you think that here in Geneva, we set up an organization, WTO, in the 90s, which is a forum for negotiation. And it's been negotiating for a while with no output. So there's something wrong. And I think, and I'm not alone, naturally, we think in university, but we also read a lot what each other are writing. So with my colleague, we consider that actually one of the reasons why multilateral diplomacy is stuck is that it has become so complex, so interlinked between the different issues that actually diplomats are doing their job correctly. They just, during the negotiation, realize that there is no way they can go home and say, okay, we can agree on that and these will be the effects. Nobody can measure that. So they're doing their job. They say, well, we better not sign. We better lose time until we figure out what's going on. So this is where I think scientists should come into the play and should help. But we also had a very interesting example and another failure because the international community set up a panel of scientific experts, IPCC, supposed to provide us with data about why there is an absolute need to change our trajectory or behavior to mitigate the effect of climate change. And for years, these scientific experts have been publishing reports with absolutely clear evidence, and then what? It's a failure. So we think that the answer, or the path to try to find answer, is to train a new generation of people who are bilingual, it was said, who are both aware of the language of natural science and the language of social science. What is true for a natural scientist is not necessarily an evidence valid for a social scientist, and the other way around. So this is a serious problem for our societies. We need to address it, and this is why we're working to develop this curriculum, which will, I hope, provide for tools to first reorganize universities, to somehow change the silo where you do natural science, or you do social science, or you do law, or you do history, and so on. And so it's not only, basically, yeah, we could say, why don't we find translators to explain one language to the other? But people know that language are also the vehicle of a culture. It's not only technical way of saying things. So basically, it's not only the question of language, it's a question of culture. So we will try, with this curriculum, to build a new generation of, well, decision makers who have both cultures. This is challenging, but this is what we will try to do.
Excellent, and I think that is a strategy that is surely producing fruits between now and in 10 years from now. So this is, we plant the roots right now to have these integrated mindset in the future. But Christina, you're working already with professionals right now who need this right now. This type of ability. So in executive education, how do you go about, what are the methods you use to already not wait for 10 years when the new generation is ready, but to train the people who are in positions of influence and power right now on science and diplomacy?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this panel today. And I'd like to just start by reminding us that science diplomacy is a multidisciplinary field. And it's also a multi-stakeholder field. And I think that's really what is one of the key elements when it comes to designing something around science diplomacy. And at the GCSP, we have been training multi-stakeholder groups now for over 2 decades. So we have a lot of experience in doing that. And so one of my first messages that I would bring would be that in training science diplomacy and designing curriculum in science diplomacy, you need to include all the stakeholders. So I would already include now early on also the, the private sector, civil society, and national organizations, all youth, all the different groups as part of the science diplomacy training, because it will give both sides, some of the scientists, but also the diplomats, a better understanding of the complexity and actually all the interlinkages. Because we live in a world that is ever more complex, interdependent, and it can really be very difficult for any one stakeholder to actually not be overwhelmed by it all. So what we're trying to do in the trainings is actually making sure that we have on one hand experts in the different topics, but at the same time also have educators or facilitators who are really skilled in facilitating learning with this diversity of backgrounds, ways of learning. And I think that this is really important, because otherwise we still stay in all the different silos that we're in. So, these are people that help connect the dots, that help make linkages, and if these people come together in a very safe environment that we also create. We've talked about the honest or dishonesty earlier on. So what's really important for this frame of working is to build trust, and that you can only do between, in a safe environment that we as designers of courses, as facilitators, need to create. And it takes time, but it's only then that you can align and that you can talk about these different languages so that we have all a common understanding. And we might not need to know all the different dialects, but we need to have a bit like Esperanto, a language that helps us navigate all the different fields. Then, of course, it's so many ways now that you can get content in the world, on social media and different organizations that provide a lot of very content specific. But when you bring science diplomacy together, and it's a course about that, I think it's an opportunity to actually have people do things, experience things. This is part also of the translation, learning a new language. So really playing role plays, have the scientists be in the shoes of the diplomats and vice versa, so that they understand what the other world looks like, what they need, what keeps them up at night, and vice versa. So to create, as part of the trust building, the understanding, the learning of languages, also this mutual understanding. So you can have, there are so many examples of innovative tools that are coming around, computational diplomacy, etc. All this needs to already be included in this curricula so that people can demystify a bit what all this means, and brings in also lens for the future. Because I think we have now to really have the focus to the future. Everything is evolving so quickly, and if we don't make sense of it now, it's really always being behind it. So it's part of this mindset shift. And that's maybe my last point. We talk a lot about content, about tools, language, but I think, and you've said it, I think, before as well, about, the multilateralism has an issue. There are so many other leadership crises around the world. So we have so many crises, but we also have a leadership crisis. So it's also about looking at what kind of leadership skills are now needed to tackle these challenges, but also those on the future, and which mindset change needs to happen. We talk so much about tensions, dichotomies, etc., but our mindset is still very much it's either or. But it's, I think, both and. How can we make sure we leverage all the opportunities, but also not to the expense of all the risks? So it's really this dual way of thinking on so many different tensions that have already been raised. And how are you really also prepared to listen, to ask the right question, to have the empathy to really understand the other parties, to understand how they work, what they need, and how together we can create something that actually makes an impact for the future generations, for the people, for the communities. So it's inclusive, getting together and then going out together with similar messages.
A mindset shift that is the perfect bridge to also the boundary spanning. Nicolas, this is what you do in the GSPI. Now, how do you tactically use this boundary spanning to bring communities together or facilitate this communication?
Sure. Thanks a lot, and very happy to be here. So I think it's very clear from the earlier interventions that when we talk about aligning science and diplomacy, we need to talk about the people who are sort of living and breathing people who are actually doing that work of connecting those communities. And as you mentioned, Achim, at the GSPI, we tend to use that term of boundary spanners to qualify the people and the institutions that spend part or all of their time to facilitate knowledge exchange between the production of knowledge and its use in decision making. Now, I do believe that we need to, when we talk about science and diplomacy, we need to have a sort of higher baseline of appreciation and understanding from both communities on what each other profession is doing. But at the same time, I think it's not realistic to expect that all scientists will have a deep understanding of policy processes. And on the other hand, that all policy actors would have a deep understanding of how science works. In a way, it's fine that scientists focus on making great science and policy actors focus on making the best possible decisions in the face of uncertainty. But having said that, we still do need science and diplomacy and policy to align. And because each of them have so different professional cultures and so different roles in society, it's not easy for them to interact and to engage with one another. And that's precisely where boundary spanners come in. There are people that can help build relationships, build trust, gather policy and science actors around the table around common projects. Now, Geneva is actually a great place for boundary spanning professionals and mechanisms to thrive. it's a little bit of a cliche to remind that Geneva is a hub that gathers international organizations, NGOs, academic actors, and industries, but it's actually a reality, and it makes it easier for those different communities not only to mingle and to engage with one another, but it also makes it easier for people to shift professions in that environment. So you can see people who started in academia who might shift to policy organizations, people who started in policy who sort of go back to academia to take a step back and do research. And then you have a lot of platforms and think tanks in Geneva that sort of enable to have a hybrid approach to that. So there's that element of mobility in Geneva that can help shape those sort of hybrid profiles, and in a way that enables a good serendipity for people to develop a sort of boundary-spanning profile. At the last Science Diplomacy Week in May, we actually invited people from academia, from international organizations and platforms who we thought were great boundary spanners, great examples of people who are able to connect those communities. And it was quite interesting to reflect with them on some of the skills and competencies that they developed. And well, beyond being good communicators, which is a sort of baseline for that type of profile, we heard about the importance to have good networking skills and the ability to gather science and policy people around the table, finding that sort of chemistry of bringing those different professions together. We heard about the importance of having strong ethics in science while having a strong realism on political constraints, so that ability to understand sort of both worlds. And lastly, a very good understanding of what are the entry points for science to provide input in policy processes in Geneva. And on that point, well, in Geneva, it's not actually easy to understand what are the entry points when we talk about policy processes around climate change, global health, migrations. It's a very dense ecosystem. It's hard for researchers, especially when they're far from Geneva, to understand at what point they can make some input with which actors, under which processes. And so a work that the GSPI is actually doing right now is a mapping of science policy ecosystems in Geneva to better understand, again, what are the entry points for climate, migrations, human rights. What are the mechanisms that can help science and policy actors connect around those issues? How are they doing it? What support do they need? What skills do they develop? And we think this is a very important resource that's currently missing for people to be able to develop a boundary-spanning profile. And that's something that we hope will bring more transparency to that Geneva ecosystem. And again, we think that can be an important resource for the science diplomacy curriculum as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to take my hat off as the moderator and speak on behalf of the Graduate Institute, that is part of the coalition as well, and share a reflection of how we think at the Graduate Institute the immediate educational and capacity building needs might be addressed. We address this through the angle of co-creation. And here we have built a coalition between the Swiss Federal Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research, the Geneva Peacebuilding Platform, and us with our own tech hub, in order to create the Peace Tech Alliance. Now, what is this about? Where's the co-creation in there? It is leveraging the peace know-how knowledge for science so that what is developed by scientists is peace positive and not peace negative. That means real peace builders, peace negotiators, individuals can accompany scientists as they really develop breakthrough solutions. On the other hand, there is the other dimension that brings scientists to peace mediators and peace builders in order to accompany technical solutions for peace building processes, for peace negotiation processes. This alliance is starting now as we speak, and it goes through a brain trust approach where there are different constituencies which are being put together and that will be work together for the next 2-3 years in order to find really practical solution in there. And as a social science university, our message is science without social science is really risky. So whatever science funders can do to associate, to make the inclusion of social science a condition for good science to go forward, please do it. Because science only in the laboratory that is not connected to the world, we social scientists and people outside of science, we no longer want to accept that risk. So that's perhaps the way our approach that we take from this, and we have created the Tech Hub at the Graduate Institute to leverage our competences in this field and contribute to the discussion within GESDA, outside GESDA, and through all of our network. So, moderator's hat back on. Thank you very much. Thank you very much also for staying on time. Just a quick time check. We have about half an hour left to reach the end, I suppose. Is that correct? Yes? Thanks. So half an hour left. Perfect. Now, you have heard the demand side. You have heard the supply side. Now we want to hear from the real people that do the learning. No, we have a number of colleagues here who have taken Science Diplomacy Week, the course last year, and perhaps I can invite Ismail Buchanan and Sandeep Mishra on stage. If you can just go to perhaps we all move one up. This is perhaps the easiest. And now perhaps you can relate your experiences on having gone through the very processes that we have talked about, this kind of learning, boundary spanning, learning multiple languages. Now, Ismail, you come at this from the academic perspective. You're a researcher and senior lecturer at the University of Rwanda. So, from an academic perspective, what did you take away from your course in Geneva?
Thank you.
And how did you take it into your real work in Rwanda?
Thank you so much. Can you hear me, please? That is a question which I think I have to put in practice to make sure that what are we doing? And I think, first of all, let me start by thanking GESDA by inviting us, because GESDA mostly has been a kind of that fruitful result which I got from there, because with the materials, with the methodology they give us at that time when we were here, we didn't know what is all about what is science and diplomacy. But with my colleagues, the way we visited different places, CERN, Geneva Center for Security, and all those, I think I took to many areas, the theory part of it and the practical part of it. That's how my perspective was to make sure how can I inspire and how connected this to policymakers, academia, scientists with diplomat. So as one of the university, I'm from University of Rwanda, and I was privileged by the government to create what we call it Rwanda Diplomatic Academy, which is now almost like a 1.5 year. It is, I would call it my baby now, because I try to incorporate some courses, what we are teaching in the Diplomatic Academy, that was all about diplomacy and all of those. But we didn't know that we need to make sure there's a part of science so that we can make these people to come together. So for me, I think GESDA has helped me to bring the solution. So what happened is that through the material, through the methodology, then I introduced a module called Science and Diplomacy in the program. So before we used to call people from ministry, because I'm working with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we call just on people who are going to be appointed. So when the cabinet appoints somebody, is appointing a diplomat. A diplomat could come from different background. So what happened when they arrived there? I think we introduced last 4 to 3 months, because I was here in May. We didn't know that in our academy we need to call upon also people who are working with national science and technology in my country. So we did no longer calling the diplomat, but we are calling also those people, staff who are working with national science and diplomacy. Now we are training them. So during the session, what happened is that they have to debate different topics. So issue of science, issue of diplomacy. So from there, you understand that they can argue, disargue on different topics. So that is the theoretical part. And also the thing I learned here, what we did is now to make sure they can have a field visit, a field work, whereby we visit different industries. Maybe my friend is going to talk because from industry background. They've visited different embassies. But from there, what we are looking for, we have to make sure we can squeeze and bridge that gap between our scientists, including the diplomat. So what was the result? Today, I will say that we have influenced the policymakers in Rwanda. So we are no longer appointing people politically, we are now appointing professionally, which means if you want to be promoted from one level to another level now today, so we look at the sector. If somebody is going to, for example, is going to be appointed, so we have recommend to the policymakers, if you are appointing somebody in a WTO or take any kind of science in the Geneva, for example. So we have to make sure that that person has been well trained in the science field so that he can come and make sure he defend. If you are a diplomat, you are going to Geneva for negotiation skills. So we are giving them different courses on negotiation skills. We are giving them on partnership, communication skills, so that they are able to communicate to that one. So before we used to have a problem with our diplomat who could come and work here in Geneva, for example, in UN, who doesn't know how to negotiate when it comes to the climate change and all those things. So today, you can have a professional person, a diplomat who is really well exerted in the climate change. So you understand that that kind of thing, now that we talk the same language. So this is something we did. And also, it was last two to 3 months, we introduced this course of science and diplomacy in undergraduate courses. So people who are doing international relations and international relations in the political science, now they're able to take a module on science and diplomacy. What they are doing there is we bring, because we need to have, I think Lavia was talking about engagement, the community and the youth. So for us, I think we thought that by introducing this course in the module of the undergraduate, so what they are doing is a debate, whereby they can even call upon people from medical science student. We take people from geography background. We take people, students from, I'm talking about the undergraduate, so sometimes they come and make a debate. Mm-hmm. Last month, what they did, it is the competition. Yeah. So we found how they debate. We found out people from science international relation won the case. They won the case by looking at how we can take over when it comes to the next pandemic. Today, Rwanda, where I come from, we are now the hub when it comes to the health technology and so on. I think we have about digital technology and all this in Africa. We have become the hub. So we bring those topics so that our students can, we found out they are talking the same language. So that's why I want to take the example which we did in Rwanda to that extent, so in this perspective. So we have the 3 elements we are focusing, the theory part of it and the practice. At the same time, we take them to the study visit. But lastly, let me mention that we have called upon some policymakers. So today, we are able to, within our Rwanda Diplomatic Academy, we are able now, our participants or our students are able now to study policies, ICT policy. They are able to discuss on defense policies. They are able to discuss in different issues. So from there, it is easy for them to become advisory and they give their part of it. This is what I think
what your example shows so well is the kind of the need to plan for the long term with undergraduate.
Absolutely.
And as of course some speaker mentioned yesterday, the high schools are already full of scientists. No, so start very early on, and then to have solutions for right now and in the medium term.
Absolutely.
So that's where, of course, diplomatic training is very, very important to prepare the diplomats. Mm-hmm. Now, in the industry sector, how do you go about this?
Thank you.
In terms of preparing the next generation of industry leaders?
Yes, so if I'm talking more because I have the experience to work in industry and all the big MNCs on innovation and digital transformation. So first I will talk about what I learned in the GESDA event that I attended, my experience. So it was like, after COVID time, it was the first event that I attended in person and a break. So, you get a time to reflect that what it is. And it was totally fabulous, I can say. It's very different from all my past experience because, you know, when you go in the academic, it's very academic in setup. When you go on the business side, it's very business-minded setup. Here, it's a very diverse people coming from different background. So it was a very, very good networking experience. This is the first part. Then second part is also on the skill development. Like we learn as a group together about boundary spanning, also about multilateralism. So fail or pass, it's debatable. But if we reflect, yes, this is a time because if any bilateral decision or bilateral things, it has a very global impact. And we are seeing it now, like it is a war or a crisis and all. It is very easily spill over to all the countries. So I believe that it is one of the things that I learned and which is good. Other is also scenario planning and scenario building. So it is very good because then it can help you to anticipate the future and think from different perspectives. So diplomats can think from science, science people can think from diplomats, business people can think from the research perspective, and also this is a very, very good learning. I yet to apply it in a very profound way, but what I did before is, you know, the diplomacy was something that I feel that it's for different set of people. Academy, I done my studies, so it's over for me and all, but then I reflect, no, there are a lot of synergy between them, among them, and a few months back, I take a position as a board member in University of Exeter for entrepreneurship, technology entrepreneurship board, to guide them in which direction they should invest money, how to promote new startups in the university, and then spin off from the university to get funding. So it was one of the things which I think that with my skill set, with my knowledge from industry connections, I can help. So it is the first one. The second one on my leadership that I reflect. So I'm part of United Nations Mastermind 2022, where among the different participants from the UN, from academic, from World Bank and industry, that how we can, as a leader, what needs to be done to achieve the 2030 target in a sustainable goals that we have. So this is all the things on the personal side. Now I will reflect what industry. So industry things are a little bit more dynamic. So here you have what we say short term is 1 year, medium term is 3, and long term is 5 years. So you anticipate for that. There are two reasons, human reason, because if you are in a position and you know that after 5 years, you don't know, either you retire or you move, and also your focus is very, these are the time frame. And the second one is you have to survive in the fast dynamic world. So if you are obsolete, you are out of the business. And we have plenty of examples that new companies are coming and disrupting the market. So here, the thing is what we can do today. So the more things that expectation is innovation, that we must talk about innovation. Like if I give you one example, that are we lacking in technology or science to target climate change? I believe we have very strong, maybe not 100%, but 80%, 70%. So what is required here is leadership. Bad decision by a good leader or a good decision from the bad leader has a profound effect on all of us. And we have seen it in the past. We have seen it currently, the war in Europe, which people have never expected. And so I think that I want to see more in GESDA because we have plenty of leaders here. And what are the traits of leader and how to train the leaders for future, because we know that future will be much more profound. And the other things that are a little bit my personal is...
just briefly, please.
Empathy and ethics, because ethics is very personal, but very territorial in one country and in another country. And it is important because when it is not hard written or as a rule or regulation, it's your personal way that you respect it. And so I think these things I want to see more in GESDA. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Also to emphasize the empathy point, that's, I think, extremely important, but also to remind us about the competitive environment out there. So if you don't adapt, if we don't do the learning, we are not just out of business, we are out of a job. So if we are wanting to have a job in the next 5 to 10 years, us who are in our, let's say, late 30s, 40s or whatever, we got to shape up quite fast because otherwise we're going to be out of a job. Now, we have time to get a few comments from the floor. So there's, I think, microphones are right there. And I like particularly, as a professor, I like to watch particularly the people who hide in the back to see if there are any questions and comments. So you are quite far away. So do I have you on my watch in the back? Anyone in the front can, of course, also gladly come in. We have a hand right here. And these are comments, no? So don't expect any answer because time will not allow for that. So please comment or give an open question.
Yeah, so it's very interesting.
Do say who you are, please.
Oh, hi, I am Becky. I'm from South Africa, from the University of Cape Town. It's very interesting. You said that we have to have a common language, right? Politicians speak the language of power. Scientists speak the language of truth-seeking. However, we see that anti-fake news, disinformation, anti-science rhetoric is something that is very useful in order to gain political power. So I think, how do we make science diplomacy more effective and also make sure that politicians realize that it has political consequences and not just multilateral interests?
Thank you for your comment. There's one gentleman in the back. Yes. Just run fast before the hand goes down. Huh? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My name is Frank Tressler. I am the ambassador of Chile to Switzerland. And thank you very much for the opportunity of being in this seminar. It has been very educated, especially knowing a little bit more about an issue of the future, rather than the contingency that always, gets our work filled day a day. But one comment. I've been hearing for a day and a half a lot of very interesting panels, topics about science and diplomacy. And I think there's one suggestion for future seminars for next year. I would love to see more here career diplomats, because here there's a lot of academia, a lot of scientists that they talk about diplomacy, but the ones that are day-to-day working on diplomacy, I think there's a lack of that presence here. And it's very important to get together both worlds, not only academia and scientific or private companies, but also the public sector, the diplomats that actually are working on this or supposed to be working on these future issues, trying to solve one of the main topics that I've heard here, that is the lack of international rules in different matters that we see. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. And just to highlight one thing, that as on the margins of the GESDA Summit, there is in fact a delegation of 25 science and technology advisors from 25 governments, which are here. So the advisors to the diplomats, or those who are inbuilt in the foreign ministries, they are here. I'm not sure if they're here in this room, but I know that they're at GESDA. So I think there's a great awareness of getting career diplomats in. And we have, of course, Tamara as a career diplomat from Costa Rica who just wants to have 2 fingers.
Yes, thank you, because, well, I didn't have the time to talk about it, but I have been thinking since I started the program. And the question we should ask ourselves as career diplomats is, are we interested in these subjects? Because I was talking to Marga, how many of us apply to the program or to the week? How many career diplomats are here right now, sitting in this room? Because that's what I think is still missing, that we career diplomats also engage with the discussions in our communities, and that we take the time to really understand what is going around in the future. So I know GESDA has been trying to engage more also at national level with different countries. I know Marga was also for a different program in Costa Rica, but still, I have the feeling that we career diplomats are not feeling called to this kind of experiences, seminars and panels. Thank you.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's do something. Who is a career diplomat in this room? No, not me, sorry. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, good 10. Huh? So we double next year, and we speak. We have a hand right here. The lady with the green jacket.
Thank you very much, and thanks very much for this extremely important discussion. Thanks a lot to GESDA for this extremely important summit. I'd like just to comment, because a lot has been said about the lack of understanding between scientists, science, and diplomats. And I just wanted to offer another perspective, because also somebody said multilateralism is in crisis. Yes, indeed, but there are a lot of science diplomatic efforts that actually work. And I know GESDA is very much concerned about Geneva, but I just came from working for the Austrian mission at UNESCO, And there's plenty of examples where it works really well on different levels. And I think that's what I'd like to offer. There are a lot of programs within UNESCO that work not on a, this kind of meta level that we were talking, higher-rise scientists and top-notch diplomats. They really rather bottom-up, very local programs like the biosphere parks that are laboratories for sustainable development. And, and obviously they wouldn't work without science. There are really concrete examples. Or the International or Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, also part of UNESCO. It's an extremely good example where diplomats and scientists work really and there are many more programs that work really well, and including local communities, like in World Heritage, in ICT, in Intangible Cultural Heritage. So these are examples that could be studied, because they democratize also diplomacy and science and bring it down to where it really counts, to the local level. And that's where we really want to make a difference, because we don't want to make a difference in us, us talking about and finding solutions. We want to find solutions that really make a difference and impact on the ground. And that's, I think, where we as diplomats have to work together with scientists. How do we devise and design programs, not paper, not treaties? They're all important. I don't want to run out of business, I'm into the treaty-making business. But I've come to understand within UNESCO, I should be more in the business of how do I bring back all these ideas that I come around here and bring them back to the local level. And local level doesn't mean to capitals, to my ministry, but to the local level, really somewhere in the mountains of Austria.
And that, I think it's fascinating you mentioned this notion democratizing, but also I bring in the image of bridges. No, because whatever happens in Geneva or at other global policy hubs, these are bridgeheads, and they have bridgeheads elsewhere. And these bridges that go to the Austrian mountains, that go to the University of Rwanda, that go all across the world, that is, I think, what makes then these reflections in Geneva really meaningful and impactful. Because just keeping them, of course, at the global abstract level, that's important for some diplomats, but we can do better to make it real. I think there's one question right at the end. I'm very glad that the end of the room is very active and engaged. Thank you.
Thank you, Achim. And yeah, well, I sit at the back of the room. I hope it's not to be qualified as the way professors would qualify people standing at the back.
Always the best and bright in the back of the room.
I'm not a career diplomat, but I'm former diplomat of the European Union, now moved to the Graduate Institute. So I think that's also something that we need to bear in mind, that careers are not necessarily linear and that we evolve professionally. And that can also enrich the way diplomats see different words. But my question was more on the tools that we have at our disposal, and maybe building on something that Micheline Kelmiret mentioned yesterday in one of the sessions on democracy and digital, and something in which I know has been discussed in Geneva for some time, to what extent we could really work towards a public digital platform which could be used as a way to share information between different worlds, but also as a way to contribute to collective decision-making processes, what I would call, I've worked with a group of people on a negotiation platform, so that could be a way also to have an enlarged vision of what multilateralism could be, and to move towards a much more inclusive multilateralism. I know that this idea has been mentioned in the past, something that for reasons of maybe lack of means is not necessarily being pursued, but I think that could be maybe a way forward to really build that public digital space for exchange of information, but also for negotiation and decision-making on issues of common concern.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this comment. And now we're coming closer to the end of this session. I'd like to thank all of you for your time and for your comments. And I'd like to invite, and yes, and I would like to invite Rémi Quiron to the podium. You are president of the International Network of Government Science Advisors. And you have the concluding remarks for this session. I'm not sure how you're going to do this in 5 minutes, but we surely will have 5 minutes and no more. So thank you very much for being with us. And then after you, we just briefly wrap up.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks to the organizer for the invitation, especially Marga, also all the speakers. Really a lot of very interesting points that were discussed, great session. And INCSA is very happy to be partner with GESDA. And my colleague Christian Allen was here during the Science Diplomacy Week. So we want to continue to work together. Of course, some keywords, brain in a dish, for example, something that I like a lot, cybersecurity, diplomacy, of course, ethics. Ethics is something very critical that sometimes we tend to forget. Few key points. We need to be bilingual, multilingual. Often I would say we need to learn the language of the others. And I come from Montreal, from Quebec, and of course they have French and English. We used to try to understand the others. But I think that's very, very key, science and diplomacy, learning the language of the others. And this does not happen, unfortunately, in a week. We have to offer other possibilities for training. Need to involve all the partners. We talk a lot about the university, was mentioned also diplomat, need to be on board, need to be part of the group. High-level policymaker, that are not necessarily diplomats traveling all over the world. They stay in their office somewhere in a capital, but they are key also in terms of efficacy of delivering science advice. I will add a international organization like UNESCO was just mentioned. I'll add 2 others to complicate matters a bit more. Science journalists, which often can be key also in translating message from the scientific community. The other one, and challenging but very important, the public. The public, our fellow citizens, should be on board early on, and we should work with them to co-create various programs, and I think the payback will be great. Few words on INCSA, over 5,000 members in more than 130 countries. The pandemic, in a sense, helped INCSA a lot, because there's a lot of interest now to have capacity in science advice, even in very small countries. So we're trying to help them. That key here, when working together, trust, that was mentioned, understanding the challenge and sharing the value about these various challenges. Because if we don't have the same understanding, for example, of science diplomacy, that's a bit challenging if we want, and will be difficult to succeed. Sharing pool of experts. Could be diplomat, it could be science advisor, whatever, but I think it's one of the goals of INCSA, that we are sharing experts from all over the world. Opportunity for all, leaving no one behind. INCSA has chapter in Africa, chapter in Latin America, chapter in Asia. The one in Africa, we're moving the head office to University of Rwanda. So we need to talk. So these chapters work well. We'll continue to build science advice for sure. But we want to build 2 new ones. One in Europe that will focus on culture and language, taking that into consideration to deliver very, very effective science advice. The other one in North America. And there, it was mentioned at the end, at the level of cities. Because that's, yes, you could have very high level like UNESCO, WHO and others, but you need to bring that to the level of the cities, to the level of the citizen, working with mayor, working with cities, with the citizen. And there the science advice need to be framed a bit differently, in very practical terms. And we need to build capacity, and that's what we want to do. Training need to be a 2-way street. Of course, scientists need to be trained, science diplomacy, science advice, but also training high-level policymaker, training diplomat, very, very important. We have started, we have few programs, these few programs in the world. Short-term program could go for a few months to train, but I think we need more than that. And in Quebec, the Quebec government, we have started 2 years program for scientists to go to work in ministry, do their postdoc there instead of going to a lab. And now we're working on the other way around. High-level policymaker, not 2 years, I think I will not work, but a few months, to understand a bit genomics, if we want to be more informed about taking decision there. So I think we want to continue to work with you, with GESDA. For us, science is science. It's all science. It was mentioned that social science and humanity are critical. Absolutely. If they are not on board, we will not succeed. So action now, certainly we want to do, I'm very much action-driven, so we want to do business with you. We want to have successful program. If any of you are interested, just contact us and we'll try to work with you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. This brings us to the end of this session. And I'll perhaps conclude with one reflection, which is, as if we want to really go forward on this discussion and learning and boundary spanning, let's embrace conflict. Because it's not going to be easy. Because the mental frames are very, very hard to transform. And it requires a real culture of debate, disagreement, and wanting to debate and disagree more in order to get beyond this. And that means that we embrace, again, a culture of discussion and knowing how to deal with disagreement, but still moving on in wanting to find a solution. So embracing conflict is, I think, a very important element to keep the discussion going. And also then, finally, the language is a real issue. And I'm coming from the peace profession. If I'm not standing here, I'm advising governments on peace negotiations and rebel groups and so forth. And there is a very important difference how peace mediators and militaries think about the word engagement. Peace builders think you speak to the other, militaries think about you shoot at the other. So if we get beyond, make the bridge between these type of differences and understanding, then we can get somewhere. But it's a long pathway, and we have started, and let's keep going more. Thank you very much. Thank you, particularly Marga. Thanks to the technical team, and have a good coffee break now. Thank you very much.